Hello, everyone. Firstly, apologies for the state of the room. I'm in the middle of cleaning it. Parts of it look better, parts of it look worse. But also, apologies for a different video than I usually do. This is going to be off the cuff, unscripted. I thought about streaming it, but I thought about scripting it, but it didn't. None of it was right. I needed to be able to say it off the cuff, but I wanted to make sure it was still edited in some way to be better received. There's a lot of stuff going on with Xbox right now, and for the past few years, I've been a defender of them, and I think a lot of the reason I have been is because I was a big fan of that original Xbox. I have a lot of nostalgia for that first system, and that nostalgia has led me to want Microsoft and Xbox as a brand, I should say, to be good again. Now, a lot of people would say the Xbox 360 was the last time they were good, and that's technically true. But as I'm going to try and describe, I think later, that was actually the death knell of Xbox as a brand. But we'll get to that later. I want to talk about now in this generation. Because the thing is, I think there's a lot of things people right now, like everyone wants to be pie in the sky. And when people make comparisons, there's a lot of things they don't consider, right? Like people be like, oh, Nintendo does this, or Capcom. Like Capcom just recorded their seventh consecutive record year. Well, Capcom's not as big as Microsoft. And Capcom, unlike Xbox, isn't beholden to a bigger company like Microsoft. Because I think that's one of the first things I want to make clear. Xbox and Microsoft are two different entities that we conflate together. Phil Spencer, Matt Booty, Aaron Greenberg, these guys, Sarah Bond, these guys are Xbox. And I believe some of them have been honest with their promises and their statements, or at least have truths. Microsoft is a different entity. And to get the perspective of both of these, I think we need to really recontextualize the past several years. And I'm even going before the Series X, right? But first, let's just look at Xbox. Phil Spencer starts this generation with a lot of promises and a lot of considerations, and for all intents and purposes, many of them sounded great, right? I did not get an Xbox One because I'm a capitalist. I believe in voting with my wallet. I believe that's how you make a difference. Let the companies compete. All right. You don't have to buy something just because you like that company, right? Like there's this idea that I've had talking to people where they even bought a PS3 because, well, they were always loyal to Sony. They didn't like what they were doing, but they were always loyal to Sony. Why would you do that? Why would you reward somebody for making bad decisions? And leaving the PS4 and Xbox One generation, Sony was making decisions that I was not happy with. So, the Xbox One made decisions I wasn't happy with. PS4 seemed to be doing right. I bought a PS4. Now this generation, Sony's making decisions that I don't like, and Microsoft's making Xbox is making a lot of promises that I do like. So I chose to support Xbox. The thing is, PlayStation didn't make enough big obvious mistakes to set everybody's alarm bells off. So the PS5 is the default for most people. Even if they didn't like some of the decisions Sony was making, it's still the default. But I wanted to make a change. I wanted Sony to stop assuming they'd be the top dog again and to do things that were better for the consumer. So I bought an Xbox. But some of the things Phil Spencer was promising to be good for the consumer also bit them in the butt. Let's remember that at the beginning of this generation, a lot of the things that Xbox is promising sounded good in comparison with Sony, right? Take, for example, the next generation upgrades. For first-party games, Microsoft was promising anything for Xbox One that had a next-gen upgrade for Xbox Series, it would get it for free. Whereas Sony, games like Horizon, Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, they all required you to pay for an upgrade to the next generation version. And for Horizon Forbidden West, if you recall, that was a bit of a disaster. They had a lot of screw-ups, miscommunication. People didn't realize what was going on. They had to backtrack and change things a little bit. So that's one of those areas where Microsoft looked better. But at the same time, Microsoft was saying, any first-party game would also be available on PC day one. No exclusivity to the console. So, okay, that sounds good. It's, consumer choice. You can either get an Xbox if you want, or you can stay on PC. Game Pass. Game Pass is available on both console and on PC. So you have still that platform of choice. And Game Pass is a subscription that allows you to play a lot of games. And every first-party game would come to Game Pass. So for, a relatively low price, like if you played two $60 games on Game Pass, and you paid for a year's subscription. At least that's the way they bill it. So these things felt very consumer-friendly. They felt very positive. Microsoft was making a lot of good promises. Now, the thing is, they had bought a bunch of studios, and I think everyone was wary. But you can also see some of the logic. It was a variety of studios. After they had shut down so many and tried to make a Xbox and Gears of War factory that failed, they were trying to get a bunch of promising developers, and Phil Spencer was promising creative freedom. This sounded good. Everyone wants developers to have creative freedom. Nobody fully trusted them yet, but it still sounded good. Especially because, again, you've looked at what Sony was forcing upon not just first-party, but third-party Japanese developers, even for their own native country with different standards. It looked good. So at the beginning, Microsoft had a lot of good-sounding decisions, but they had two things. One, they didn't give a reason to buy an Xbox yet because you'd had no games that were only on Xbox. Everything was also going to be on PC. The only reason to get an Xbox is if you preferred console. And for most people playing on a console, they were already jumping to the PS5 because that was the more surefire bet. But you also have the fact that nobody knew what first-party games were going to be coming, right? You had a sense of Hellblade 2, of course. I mean, Ninja Theory was the perfect studio to get to counter the prestige single-player narrative game that Sony had been so well known for, that Sony had pushed. Ninja Theory could make that kind of game and make it well, but there was still nothing yet. And Halo Infinite came out, it was a bit of a flop, but no series games were exclusive yet, not until 2023. Now, this is where things start to become a problem, right? With how people perceive these scales, the difference between Xbox and Microsoft. And if I've been going back and forth between the two, I apologize. I'm still trying to separate the two entities in my head. We're so used to talking about the two in the same breath as if they're the same entity. And while Xbox is beholden to Microsoft, the people running Xbox are different than the people running Microsoft. And this is important to understand why we're at where we're at, right? Because Microsoft just spent a lot of money for this failing division to, start making money again, right? Think about, and here's where we're going to it, right? Xbox 360, Red Ring of Death. Everybody knows that was a bad thing, right? And I tried to defend it at the time when I was in college, right? I tried to, because I worked at GameStop during the PS2, Xbox, GameCube era. Do you know how many PS2s we got back in that were busted? We got so many in. There were people that I even talk to today that are like, oh yeah, man, I had to get like 3 or 4 different PlayStation 2s because they kept breaking. The thing is, it wasn't a 100% like the Red Ring of Death was. That is the problem with why Microsoft could never recover from that. And I mean Microsoft because the thing is, though Microsoft was big enough to afford this, the Xbox was a gamble. The first Xbox was a gamble. If it failed, then, Microsoft would just never do video games again. Or at least not in terms of a console. But the Xbox succeeded well enough that the Xbox 360 was their chance to try. And the Xbox 360 was a success. Because the Sony dropped the ball badly enough. But that Red Ring of Death is the first time that people lost trust with Microsoft. Or with Xbox, I should say. But Microsoft, and this time I do mean Microsoft, they had to foot the bill for replacing all those systems. Every single console that broke, they ate the cost of the shipping, the replacement, be it of parts or by actually just putting in a new system and shipping it back. Every system up to a certain year at least. And that was like 2 or 3 years in? 2 or 3 years worth of console systems that they had to basically eat the cost of. And you're already usually selling consoles at a loss. So that's the first time that for Microsoft, this Xbox gaming division was a big money sink. But at the time, it was still earning enough money. You had the Xbox Live subscription people were paying for. People were still buying the games. They were getting games purchased digitally through the Xbox Live Arcade. It was able to make enough money to justify all of that cost. But by the end of that generation, we all know the story of the TV for Xbox One, the Kinect being the attempt to, jump on board with the Wii kind of technology. And it turns out they should have waited for VTubers, because that's effectively the technology they were selling. But the Kinect was a forced package with the Xbox One. That was a disaster. And even then, by the end of the 360, Microsoft didn't really have any more first-party IP. They had a lot of stuff early in the generation that they pitched and sold, but by the end of that generation, Bungie was leaving, so they made their own Halo factory. Epic Games was done with Gears of War, so they made their own Gears of War factory. And this shows the mentality at the time that they were just going to create studios to churn out these games like wickets. Right. And that also shows the mentality at the time of the executives, both of Xbox, because it was Don Matrick, of course, formerly of EA, and it was Microsoft executives. They thought they were in the business of selling wickets. So when the Xbox One comes out, nobody wants to connect force with their system. Nobody wants TV. And there's no other games than Halo or Gears or Forza, I suppose. Forza being the good racing game, but the thing with racing is it doesn't appeal to everyone. They were not, and promises of Fable, when everything about Fable was in the air. Nobody knew anymore. So Microsoft didn't really have anything. And of course, you had the used game issue, so Microsoft had their PS3 moment. Microsoft dropped the ball so bad that everyone just went to PS4, I'm sorry. And that means Microsoft, and I do mean Microsoft, not Xbox, ate the cost of that generation up. That was a generation in the red. So here comes Phil Spencer, right? A guy that knows games. A guy that, forgive me, Don Matrick did develop games at one point, so it's weird that he made all these poor decisions. But it also goes to show that just because someone's a developer, just because they have this background, it doesn't mean they know how to run a business. Phil Spencer felt like he had both of those things. He was a gamer. He does play games. He does like games, but he also had some business acumen. So they put Phil Spencer in charge. Phil Spencer builds his team. And I think Phil Spencer did have the best intentions. And I do think many of his team did. I think everything they were promising us, they were promising Microsoft and more, because they're saying this is going to pay off. Gamers are going to like this. And he wasn't entirely wrong, but he miscalculated. And he definitely miscalculated how long it would take for these games to develop. From all these studios they were buying, which again, Microsoft's signing each of these checks. And as they sign each one, they're saying, you better be right, Phil. You better be right, Phil. Bethesda was a big investment. You better be right, Phil. And finally, Activision Blizzard, that's a huge cost, and they're saying, you better be right, Phil. That's a lot of checks to be signing, and a lot of expensive money. Xbox as a division within Microsoft is clearly in the red, and Microsoft has been in the red with this Xbox division a long time. They're waiting and expecting a return on investment. So come around to 2023. The system's not selling as well as the competition. So all of Phil's promises to appeal to gamers aren't working. Their biggest property of Halo Infinite was a mess. It wasn't as bad as people expected given Halo 5 and technically even Halo 4, but it was not measuring up to the Bungie years. 2023 rolls around, where their Bethesda investment's supposed to pay off. Hi-Fi Rush is a surprise release. It's received well, but is it going to make back what's necessary for what Microsoft paid for? Not Xbox paid for, Microsoft paid for. And I think this is where people start to lose the scale, right? And here's the thing. I'm not defending Microsoft in this instance. I feel like sometimes I'm put in that position because people lack enough of the greater picture, enough of the perspective, right? You have to understand, why are these things happening? Why can't you just say, well, these other companies are able to do it, right? Or why can't you just say, well, Hi-Fi Rush was a success, so why are you, why are you punishing Tango Gameworks? Well, a couple of reasons. One, Ghostwire Tokyo before that wasn't that big of a success, and that sold on PS5 first. That was a PS4 and PS5 game, right? Was it that big of a failure? No, but Ghostwire Tokyo wasn't a huge success. Microsoft was going to be getting some of that money, but it wasn't enough. Hi-Fi Rush comes out. Hi-Fi Rush does well in regards to accolades, but it doesn't do as well as what Microsoft wants from Xbox. So when Aaron Greenberg comes out to address, some of the accusations that Microsoft's not happy, he could have been correct in speaking for Xbox. Xbox could have been very happy with where Hi-Fi Rush was. They could have been very happy with its reception, with its sales on Steam, with its sales on Xbox, but was Microsoft happy? So I don't think Aaron Greenberg was necessarily lying, but I do believe he was lying about the rumor, because there's a difference between if Xbox is happy and if Microsoft is happy. But, Phil and the rest of the guys are probably like, look, we need this kind of a game. It's a big win for us. They're telling their bosses at Microsoft, like, it's a big win for us. Just wait for Redfall and just wait for Starfield. Redfall. Now, Redfall is actually an example alongside the Saints Row reboot with Embracer, because it's funny, it's two very similar stories where these guys are promising creative freedom to the studio. Very little oversight, right? The problem is, it's not Xbox overseeing Arcane Austin, and therefore it's not Xbox giving Arcane Austin freedom. Xbox is overseeing ZeniMax and Bethesda, and letting ZeniMax and Bethesda run things how they see fit. And ZeniMax still has a bunch of foolish executives that were trying to tell the Arcane Austin developers, you need to do this. So Xbox needed to be going in, looking at what Redfall had, talk to the developers maybe about what they wanted to do, and who knows, maybe they did this, and the developers were too scared. They didn't want to make their new bosses angry. They didn't want to risk losing their job or anything. I mean, who knows what the attitude was? I don't. We know some information from interviews, but I don't think we actually understand, because what those post-release, leaks and interviews clarify is that ZeniMax was the one making demands. So if Phil really wanted these studios to be making what they wanted to make, he needed to be willing to step in to the ZeniMax executives, look at this and be like, why are you having these guys make a game they're not good at? Why are you forcing them to make a game different from what they specialize at? These guys have a very specific thing they want to make, but Phil didn't do that. He let ZeniMax and Bethesda do what they do. And it bit Xbox in the butt, because Redfall comes out. It has very mixed to negative reception. Very few people are having a good time with it. And there were people that tried to convince everyone it wasn't that bad. And that's the thing. Redfall, my experience with Redfall was that it was buggy milquetoast. Like, it was just bland. I didn't play much of it because, I could have, but there were better games for me to play at the time. If you paid me to play it, sure. But the way it released, nah. It was fine. And that's the thing. It was buggy, but fine. But, patches can fix bugs. The thing is, it wasn't good. There's a difference between fine, okay, and good. And there's also a difference between fine, okay, and bad. But Redfall was no better than fine, and it wasn't good enough, and therefore it wasn't going to get sales. And, the other important thing, neither Hi-Fi Rush nor Redfall were going to get Game Pass subscriptions. So fall comes around, and here comes Starfield. And people have been comparing a lot between, I got into a discussion, Starfield and Hi-Fi Rush. No matter your opinion, Starfield sold a lot more than Hi-Fi Rush. Starfield would draw in more subscriptions than Hi-Fi Rush, because no matter what your personal feelings as an enthusiast hobbyist gamer, more mainstream broad audience gamers enjoy Bethesda games than rhythm-based character action. I'm not trying to say one is better than the other. Let's not make that mistake. And I understand that Starfield spent a long time in development. Again, this is a discussion I got into with someone. It's one of those things that, again, it's myopic. It's you only see what you want to see. And when it comes to something like this, there's a lot more going on because Starfield, okay, yeah, Starfield was what, like a decade in development? Technically, how many of those years did Xbox pay for? 3. So they didn't have as much to lose as you'd think, but this also isn't a THQ situation. If you watch the Darksiders documentary, you'll see the developers, after Darksiders 2, they'll talk about how THQ's going bankrupt, right? So all of these studios and everything are getting sold for pennies on the dollar, in other words, for cheap, but Vigil Games wasn't sold. Why? Because they just shipped a game, and what people were really buying was games near development, and they were able to buy them for cheap. ZeniMax and Bethesda were not close to going out of business. They were not going bankrupt. They were doing fine. So Microsoft comes in and they have to pay full price. They don't get a bargain. They don't get a discount. So they have to foot not just the rest of the bill for the development of these games, but they have to then make back that investment. And for the case of Starfield, yes, the game did better than the other two in terms of numbers. And that's, again, you got to think about just raw numbers. But was it good enough to make Microsoft happy? And when you combine with the reception, I think maybe that's part of the reason why 2024 has been the way it is. Because by the time the Activision Blizzard deal goes through, Microsoft is looking at the last year they had, where 2023 was supposed to be the payoff of their Bethesda acquisition. Hi-Fi Rush sells well, but they're still in the red. Redfall is a failure and pushes them more into the red. Starfield does well enough, but not enough to get them out of the red. But Starfield does closer to what Microsoft wants to see in the numbers than what Hi-Fi Rush was doing. And this is the area that people do not understand, because Microsoft just signed that $69 billion or however much it was for Activision Blizzard. And even though Phil made a lot of promises, he made promises that were not his to keep. This is my belief, at least. I can't say for a fact, I'm not an insider, but I believe this is the situation because it tracks. It makes sense, right? Phil Spencer was telling his bosses, just wait, just wait, just wait. Just like he was telling all of us, just wait, just wait, just wait. And as much as we were disappointed in the end product, Microsoft is bound to be more disappointed in the fact that they were not getting their money back. Xbox was not generating the revenue that they needed to be generating. And so Microsoft looks at this Activision Blizzard deal and is now looking to cut costs because they don't want another issue like Bethesda. They don't want to sit there waiting several years for these games to come out and then not make their buck back. So we have all of these new initiatives. Release games on, and chances are the third party was already in motion earlier. The releasing Hi-Fi Rush on PlayStation systems, that was probably in motion at the very least by the end of 2023, because by then Microsoft couldn't have been happy. So the Activision Blizzard deal goes through, everything's expensive. Microsoft's not going to be happy, so all right, let's try and cut what we can. And now we have this latest round. And again, why Tango Gameworks? Why Arcane Austin? Microsoft wants to know what these guys can do for them now. And Tango Gameworks does not specialize in the game that they want. And this is part of the problem with big executives that don't understand the gaming industry, right? Because after how much, and that's the thing, let's take from a very baseline, 69 billion plus what was it, like 7 billion or something for ZeniMax Bethesda? Like, it was a lot of money. And then all the money added up for these other studios. Like, they're billions in the red. Do you really think the Xbox division is making billions? I don't think so. And so Microsoft wants the surefire thing. Call of Duty to them is a surefire thing. And while they could put it on Game Pass, we're now seeing it's in debate. It's in debate whether you put Call of Duty on Game Pass because Call of Duty is a guaranteed seller. Why would you risk giving that away for free when you could sell all those copies and get that money back, right? release a bunch of these smaller games third party in order to recoup some of the cost, because let's face it, Hellblade 2, it's probably going to do pretty well, but it's going to do well enough. Invest in proven franchises, right? What's more proven than Elder Scrolls and Fallout for them right now? And Doom. Doom's pretty proven as well. But that's the thing. Microsoft themselves are going to be pushing Xbox to chase trends. So while Matt Booty tries to say, you know, we the day after, we need smaller award-winning games, well, you closed one of the studios, but was it his choice? And is that the feeling that Xbox has? I believe Xbox knows that you need a variety of games that are going to draw customers in. Hi-Fi Rush was a start. You need more than just Hi-Fi Rush, though, because that's the thing. Yeah, Starfield as an individual game may draw subscribers in, but if you have a lot of smaller games like Hi-Fi Rush, you're going to get a lot of other players in. And you're also going to guarantee those players will keep coming back for other games like that. The problem is, Xbox has to bow to Microsoft's demands. I think, in hindsight, we were all distracted with the possibility of Microsoft saving Activision Blizzard from Bobby Kotick. Not that we thought Microsoft would be much better, but we didn't think, because everyone just looks at Microsoft as this big, huge company and only thinks, oh, of course they have the pockets to do that. They can eat up a loss. But do we really think the executives are going to be that happy about it? Since the 360, the Xbox division has been eating costs. And originally the Xbox was part of a gadgets division, like the same division as Zune, but I believe now Xbox is their own division. And either way, even within this gadgets division, if they were still a part of another division, dude, that's you're eating cost, no matter what. And this is what I mean when I look back on the Xbox and its history. And I always recommend people like that, at least the first few episodes of their documentary about the making of the original Xbox. That right there is a great series of episodes, because the guys that made the original system, they were gamers and they were developers, and they were thinking, what kind of a console would we want? And they had that independent spirit, and even though they were in Microsoft, it was like being in the belly of the beast. These guys were trying to make something they believed in, while the rest of the company didn't. The rest of the company was against them. They had to fight Bill Gates, right? They had to do what they could, and then they had to fight everyone's desire to put Windows on the Xbox. They had to fight everyone's desire to put Office on the Xbox, right? So you had these passionate group of developers that after the first system ships, after they ship the original Xbox, go away. They leave. All those long hours of work, that's a young man's game. You're right. And they did it. They went to their war, and now they're done. They're veterans. They want to have an easier life now. So the Xbox 360 immediately has a different leadership, and you can see it. It took some of those ideas, the ease of development for developers, it took the online framework. It took a lot of ideas that made the original Xbox appealing, and it pushed them forward. But that's where you also started to get the problems of executive thinking. And it's no wonder that the Xbox One was a disaster, because anyone that made the original Xbox good was gone. The Xbox 360 was an attempt to be iterative on the original Xbox, but they also rushed it in the way that allowed Red Ring of Death to happen. First loss of trust. Xbox One crushed that trust. Xbox Series, most people are wary. It's like, let's see what you really do for me. We are now in a position where, again, like, look at Capcom. Capcom had a record year, but Capcom is only beholden to themselves. They don't have to make a higher company happy. Nintendo specializes in lower tech stuff, the kind of stuff that most enthusiast gamers don't go for. And even for a broad appeal, it's a mixed bag. My neighbor, he has an Xbox and a Nintendo Switch. What does he play? Call of Duty, Madden, and MLB on the Xbox, Pokemon on the Switch. That's it. 4 games. He's got 2 systems, but he only plays the 4 games. He doesn't play Mario. He doesn't play Kirby. He doesn't play any Donkey Kong games. Like, he plays Pokemon. And I think that's where a lot of enthusiast gamers just you lose an attachment. You don't actually understand the broader audience, and I don't understand the broader audience. I don't even understand other, core gamers, honestly. Now, do I want people to sympathize or empathize with Xbox or Microsoft because of all this? No. I just want people to, I guess you could say, make stronger arguments. It's like I said before, like during these layoffs and stuff, people keep arguing, oh, that's capitalism, that's capitalism. No, it's a bad economy, and honestly, yeah, it's a bad economy. It's a bad economy worldwide. The games industry isn't the only one hurting. And that's part of the thing that I want to get across. But at the same time, the decisions being made, a lot of them are stupid. They should have kept Tango GameWorks open, but the problem is they're punishing the wrong people. You know who's really redundant? Every executive at ZeniMax and Bethesda. They don't need to be there making decisions. Those are the guys that are redundant. Those are the guys you get rid of. They're the ones making the most money, too, every year. That have the most stock. Get rid of them. Cash them out. Let them have their golden parachute if you want. Get rid of them. Temporary, cost absorption, but then keep the employees, keep the creatives. But no, they didn't do that. Why? Because executives trust executives more than they trust creatives. And honestly, this is, again, Phil Spencer. What are you doing, right? But maybe because Phil Spencer's trying to communicate to the executives, they don't understand why you get rid of a ZeniMax executive. I don't know. I mean, I'm just spitballing here. I'm not happy about this either, though. I just hope that the guys at Tango GameWorks, get back up. It seems like a lot more developers, leave studios or get laid off and then jump to a new studio in Japan. But maybe they'll all join Hideki Kamiya, right? Who knows? All I know is my faith and trust in Xbox is done. I have a lot of nostalgia for that first system. I loved it. And even small things, right? Like the Xbox 360 party system, great, revolutionary for its time. Sony did it better afterward. For the PS4, Sony's party system was superior, and the Xbox Series still runs the party system like the 360 did. And that's a problem. And if that sort of small thing is indicative of how these guys are running Xbox, then no matter how many good promises you try to make, you guys don't seem to actually know what you're doing. And while I don't like what a lot of the executives at Sony are doing, well, they got Stellar Blade. And that's not a confession I'm going to get a PS5, but they got a game I want to play. That's more than I could say for much of what you guys are putting out, like what Xbox is putting out. I mean, it stinks. I wanted to make my voice heard. I wanted to show that I wanted something other than what Sony was selling. But Microsoft, you guys couldn't even spend some money to get some exclusives. You should have spent some money to get some third-party exclusives, even if they were temporary, instead of buying Activision Blizzard. It's that simple. I mean, hindsight, 2020, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but you guys really needed to fill out your portfolio, because guess what? All of the games Sony has coming out this year so far that have been really well received, Helldivers 2, third-party exclusive. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, third-party console exclusive. Stellar Blade, third-party console exclusive. And it's looking like they're going to have Lost Soul Aside joining alongside that. And you know what? This is a year that they admitted no first-party games in 2024. But they're still able to fill out that portfolio with exclusives. Nintendo was right. The name of the game is the game. And for a lot of people, Microsoft, you made a lot of good promises, but the only thing you didn't deliver on was the game. Sorry, Xbox. I keep switching back. They are two different entities. But it is a shame. At this point, though, I'm just done. No PlayStation purchases, no Xbox purchases. I might get the system used because I want to preserve games physically. We can't trust the all-digital future, which is the downside of the PC. Yeah, I can stick to the PC because thus far Valve has been trustworthy, but what happens when Gabe Newell retires? What happens when Gabe Newell's gone? What's going to happen to Valve? Who's going to be in charge? Can we really expect them to keep their promise that if something should ever go down with Steam, that they're going to deactivate the online activation, the DRM? We can't trust that. So, all right, so I have a bit of an addendum here. I expected to edit everything yesterday, but it was taking longer than I expected. Evidently, this unscripted thing is longer than I was hoping for. In the time since I recorded yesterday, Sarah Bond has been interviewed by Bloomberg, and she had a lovely response to quite the question. So, if you would please, just humor me a little longer as we watch this video together.
One of the things that was most upsetting both to Xbox gamers and to employees is that, one of the shuttered studios in particular just created a hit game, did really well on Game Pass in terms of engagement, and won a ton of awards. Shouldn't succeeding in that way ensure the future of a studio?
One of the things I really love about the games industry is it's a creative art form. And it means that the situation and what success is for each game and studio is also really unique. Like there's no one size fits all to it for us. And so we look at each studio, each game team, and we look at a whole variety of factors when we're faced with sort of making decisions and trade-offs like that. But it all comes back to our long-term commitment to the games we create, the devices we build, the services, and ensuring that we're setting ourselves up to be able to deliver on those promises.
Sarah Bond's got quite a future in politics with an answer like that. I mean, I haven't heard a verbose answer that completely dodges the question like that in a long time. That is like politician stuff. That is presidential debate stuff, man, dodging the question like that. One of the things I also wanted to mention here is the cameraman, or the camera director, I should say, obviously focuses on that year-over-year growth while she's talking. And that probably makes it sound like I'm wrong when it comes to me talking about Xbox being the red. But do we really think $75 billion spent on an acquisition will result in that kind of growth? Those graphs are growth with an asterisk. Again, this is my belief. This is not something I can really say with proof. And if I word it wrongly, then it's going to sound like conspiracy theory stuff. But honestly, that graph is for the investors to have them feeling like, don't worry, it's not that bad. Because there's no way you spend that much on those acquisitions and have as little growth as they actually do. Like Game Pass subscriptions might have gone up a bit for Starfield, but they're not going up enough. These games aren't selling enough. And we already have the figures over the holiday season. The Series X and the Series S did not sell. Sarah Bond did not answer the question. She did not address Hi-Fi Rush. She gave a complete non-answer, and you could tell in her eyes the whole time she was searching for the next thing to say that sounded somewhat on topic, but it was all just to distract us and get us to forget what was even asked in the first place. At the end of the day, Xbox themselves are not being honest with their customer. All the promises are lies now. No matter what good-natured intent Phil Spencer had, no matter what good-natured intent Matt Booty, Aaron Greenberg, Sarah Bond, no matter any of their intent, they are liars now. Nothing can be trusted. And maybe that's not completely true. Maybe they aren't always lying. Maybe they aren't all liars, but they can no longer be trusted. And you could even argue that they couldn't be trusted before. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, all that stuff. But at this point, it is not worth supporting Microsoft anymore. And the original Xbox is just a system that I've got a lot of nostalgia for. And if you've got a lot of nostalgia for the Xbox 360, because that's what you grew up with, because that's what got you into gaming, then that's not the Xbox that exists today. And it is highly doubtful that Xbox is ever coming back. Maybe this is doom and gloom. Maybe it's not. But either way, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, comment and let me know. If you did not enjoy it, please comment and let me know. I'm actually curious if I should do more stuff like this. As it's very risky. I mean, it's faster to edit than a regular video, but it's also easy for me to just shoot off my mouth and say stupid stuff. Or in hindsight, look back and think, wow, that was really dumb. I'm used to writing and I'm used to editing. I'm used to doing multiple drafts of things. And even then, I'm usually not satisfied with the final product. So going unscripted, you can only imagine. So in the meantime, sorry to keep you guys around that long. You all have a good, wonderful weekend. And to all you moms out there, have a happy Mother's Day.